And this next discussion, you're going to hear from two global thought leaders who are leveraging their international institutions to address roots of giant problems in very creative ways. So it's my pleasure to introduce these two speakers in their fireside chat. The first is Dr. Carol Dahl. She's executive director of the Lemelson Foundation, and her work has no small vision. Dr. Dahl leads the foundation's work to use the power of invention to change lives and to nurture the next generation of inventors and entrepreneurs, which the foundation does very generously around Oregon as well as globally, including at the Inventor competition, which is our state's first collegiate invention competition. The work of the foundation touches inventors and entrepreneurs to improve economic growth and to solve social and economic problems in developing countries. Her resume is the best it could be for this. She comes to us from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the National Institutes for Health. She has a commanding understanding of DNA sequencing and nanotechnology. She brings to the foundation a grace and determination that is required for the difficult work she oversees. Dr. Dahl will be joined in the conversation by John Warner, who's joining us all the way from Massachusetts, back on a red eye tonight, so thank you, John. John is just one of those people who doesn't seem to see a lack of opportunity in anything that he does. It's not a barrier or a confine, but an opportunity. He blends psychology with molecular physics to make the entire chemical industry less harmful. Very interesting work. He leads the world's work in what we now know as green chemistry. He also runs a nonprofit dedicated to training the next generation of educators in this to change chemistry and incorporate green principles throughout. He's the founder of the Warner Babcock Institute, and he has won some of the highest awards in science and science education with nearly 300 patents. We are truly honored to have both of these speakers with us for their fireside chat. Dr. Dahl and John, thank you.
Great. I want to welcome all of you to the session on impact inventing, and maybe just a few words before I introduce my fireside chatty. I don't know. So I'm Carol Dahl. As Angela said, I am executive director at the Lemelson Foundation. A little bit about us. We are a private family foundation based right here in Portland at the north end of the Pearl. So we are around, very close by. And as was mentioned, our mission is improving lives through invention. And that is really from the core of our being, because our founder, Jerry Lemelson, was one of the most prolific independent inventors of the last century. And he and his wife, Dorothy, started the foundation because they had seen the power of invention and the impact invention had on creating a better tomorrow and a more equitable future, in a sense, for those around us. And so they started the foundation with a goal, as was mentioned, of inspiring a next generation of inventors, but also ensuring that there was an ecosystem that would allow inventors to take their ideas out to reach people for impact through products and businesses. So we think about this in the context of something we call impact inventing, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today in a particular context. And impact inventing for us has three core principles. One is to have social impact. Positive social impact. I know everyone here in the room believes in the importance of that, or you wouldn't be here today. But we believe very firmly in that. Inventions can have all kinds of impacts. We want to focus on that which has positive social. In addition, we believe that inventions, in order to have that impact, need to reach people. And the only really virtuous cycle we know for doing that right now is through business, to ensure long-standing access to the things that make your life different. I would probably predict that your refrigerator wouldn't be there on a reliable basis if it was being delivered by a nonprofit organization that was an NGO. And so we should probably demand the same things of the future inventions that we would like to see out there. How do we ensure that they're reliably? But the third piece that we're going to dig into more deeply today about impact inventing is that we believe very much that inventions, particularly physical inventions, can have both positive and negative impacts, and sometimes those negative impacts are unintended. And one of the ones that is certainly in this day and age, most visible to us is the unintended negative impacts on the environment and our relationship with our planet. And so we believe in environmental responsibility as a core aspect of impact inventing, and we'll get a little deeper into that in a moment. We're also really pleased to be here because we're proud to actually sponsor this event and take part in it. It's an opportunity to really bring together investors, entrepreneurs, inspire students, build a community around the idea of impact. It's a pleasure always to work with Portland State University. We've had a close relationship, and they've been a great partner for us at the Lemelson Foundation in terms of creating a pipeline of next-generation inventors and also supporting local and national ecosystem around entrepreneurship and invention. And we applaud them for hosting a conference such as this that's really focused on bringing together individuals in the community to unite on a path towards more positive impact for the future and creating a better tomorrow. So, with that said, I am really thrilled to have John Warner here today, and I'm going to do a little more introduction and touch on a few more things, just because John is such an extraordinary individual, and I think by the time we leave this conversation, you'll understand why I feel that way. John has had certainly a very varied and interesting path to where he is today, and I'm going to ask him in a few minutes to tell you in his own voice about that. But a few highlights just to let you know. He really embodies the essence of what we think of as impact inventing in support of a better future. It's tough to be brief, but let me say he's had an interesting journey. He started with a passion around music, and he may even comment on how he ended up there with music. Maybe it was not as a result of a linear path, but then made what was the incredibly linear path from music to chemistry. I mean, that's everyone's path to chemistry. And so chemistry has really been his lifelong passion. He got a bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Massachusetts and then went on to receive his master's and PhD at Princeton in chemistry as well. Began his career kind of going down that traditional path. He went to industry, working at Polaroid. At Polaroid, he clearly did something that was transformational, which was he created several fields of science, something each of us does on every year and day, one of which we're going to go deeper into today, which is really about green chemistry. So he was at Polaroid for a few years and then left to create a Center of Green Chemistry at University of Massachusetts because, as you'll hear, John is also passionately committed to transferring new concepts and ideas to the next generation and empowering them for future impact. He also created the first PhD program in the world in green chemistry, so that should be a challenge to all of the university members in the room that if they don't have one, they ought to have one. I would comment that then he moved on and created the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry. We talked about the importance of actually seeing things go to market and reach people, and I think it's John's passion that led him to engage in Warner Babcock so that things could move forward and turn into products and reach people, really delivering on impact through industry, entrepreneurship, and the delivery out into the community of products. So John's work has been highly recognized. Angela commented on a few things, some extraordinary things, such as receiving the Perkin Medal of Chemistry from the Chemistry Industry Society, their highest award, being named one of 25 visionaries changing the world by Utne Reader, but also being awarded the 2004 Presidential Award for Excellence in Science from the United States government for his educational excellence in terms of how he was bringing new approaches to education. John also has kind of a distinct honor of having, last year, had the German Ministry of Economics and the Technical University of Berlin announcing the John Warner Center for Green Chemistry Startups. So that seems a little random, and it speaks to the international influence that he has. And then, of course, the most important piece, my own personal favorite, is that he is a AAAS Lemelson Invention Ambassador, so is really an ambassador to the community about the importance of invention. But enough said by me. I could go on and on and on. His work has touched things all the way from Alzheimer's to oncology to wood composites to thermal imaging, semiconductor fabrication. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to do that, just to let you know that his passions and interests have no bounds. So John, Let's get started. Let me start by first asking you, I think it'd be great for the audience to get to hear your story more personally, because you have a fantastic way of telling it. So can you take a few minutes and just tell them your journey? How did you end up here?
Okay. Well, thank you, Carol. It's intimidating introduction there. I can only disappoint you now. It's interesting, the title here of opposites. I tend to think that most people would look at green chemistry as two opposites in and of themselves, and hopefully I'll convince you otherwise. So, yeah, I'm not some kid who grew up dreaming of being a chemist. I didn't have a chemistry set when I was 6 years old. In fact, I come from the city of Quincy, Massachusetts. You can tell by my accent here. And I had over 40 first cousins within a 1-mile radius. We were carpenters, plumbers, electricians. We had no idea what college was. I thought when I had English on the second floor of my school, that was higher education. And when I came home one day and told my parents I was going to college, my father was mad, my mother cried, and I went to UMass Boston, which at the time was $200 a semester. I worked full-time in the construction industry, paying my tuition. But what horrified my family worse than the fact that I was going to college is what I went to college for. You see, I was a music major. Oh my God. But wait for it, the name of my band was The Elements. Okay? This had nothing to do with carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. It was kind of earth, wind, and fire. We really sounded like the Cars, actually. And we were doing okay. But disaster hit early on in that the drummer ended up getting leukemia, and over the course of a couple months, he passed away. And here, my whole life self-definition was I'm a musician. Well, at UMass, like most universities, there's a core curriculum. You have to take a math class, have to take a foreign language, and so I had to take a science class. So I was taking chemistry just to get rid of it. Okay? I had no particular interest in it. I just had to take a science class. And one day a professor comes in and asks the kid next to me if he wanted to do research. This stuff was going on in my music life, and I said, can I come? And I followed him into the research lab. And I got to tell you, when I got into the research lab, everything changed. My whole life, there were two types of people, artists and scientists. And because I was marginally okay at music, I was an artist. But when I got into the lab and I saw that scientists and chemists invented and created and imagined things, my worldview kind of changed. I imagined putting my brain with all these electrodes and composing a piece of music on a keyboard or designing a molecule. And I said, I bet you the same neurological activity happens. Bringing something into the world that didn't exist before has nothing to do with the word art or science. It's being human, it's inventing, it's things like, and once I got that, I fell in love with chemistry. Next thing you know, I'm publishing papers, getting awards. I was actually on the cover of Celebrity magazine with Boy George in 1984. They called me Boston's best and brightest college graduate. It was a very embarrassing piece where they do this story about this kid who's invented over 100 molecules that have never existed in the world before, putting atoms in unique geometry that God never intended. I'm looking at this thing and I say, I'm a chemist? How did that happen? Well, next thing you know, I find myself at Princeton doing cancer chemotherapy with a great group of people and had a wonderful group. I played a teeny role in the drug Alimta. It's one of the most successful anti-cancer drugs for solid tumors. I lost my mom in early 2000 to lung cancer. She was actually receiving the drug that we had designed as graduate students back in the 80s. Now, I just played a tiny role in this. A lot of people did a lot of stuff, but Princeton now has a 7-story chemistry building built entirely on the proceeds of that one molecule. I expected to go into academia. I already had a couple appointments to be a professor of medicinal chemistry when, out of the blue, a senior corporate officer from Polaroid asked me to head exploratory research at Polaroid. I said, dude, I'm a medicinal chemist. I'm going into academia. He told me how much he was going to pay me. I said, when do I start? I'm an industrial chemist. How did that happen? But what would a medicinal chemist do at a place like Polaroid. I got really introspective about the chemical enterprises. I'm looking at the way we manufacture stuff, okay? And we make cool things in chemistry, the drugs that cure us, the agricultural agents that feed us, the textiles, the clothing. But everything we do, we manufacture at high temperature, at high pressure, using nasty reagents and all this. And I said, if you look out in nature, if you look in physiological systems that medicinal chemists use, everything is at ambient temperature. Everything's at ambient pressure. Everything uses water as a solvent. Why is it that we humans have to ram things down the throat and force things to happen when in nature they kind of happen spontaneously? And I kind of call that molecular psychology, but the technical term was non-covalent derivatization. And if you wanted me to talk for about 30 hours, I could. The license plate of my car is NCD. But I won't. Several inventions at Polaroid was based on this thing called non-covalent derivatization. Now, in the United States, if you want to go to large-scale manufacturing, you've got to get EPA approval. So the Polaroid submitted for approval these inventions of mine, and they said, non-covalent derivatization, we never heard of this. So they sent me to Washington to explain this technology. And I said, isn't anything better for the environment going to be new and different? If the EPA says new and different bad, isn't that locking us in to the current state of things? And so I'm talking to the branch chief of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. Wait a minute. Remember the kid I followed into the lab when I was a music major? It was him. I'd known him my whole life. His name was Paul Anastas. And so we're talking about, gee whiz, we need to think of this in a bigger picture. How do we anticipate making things that are better for the environment? Now, full stop. This is happening in my life. I'm a Polaroid employee down at the EPA. I get tons of inventions, tons of awards. My head is the size of huge things. And aren't I awesome? Aren't I cool? When disaster hits in the worst way imaginable, I lose my 2-year-old son to a birth defect. At the night of his funeral, I'm staring at the ceiling and I'm asking myself, what if something I touched caused my son's disease? What if, heaven forbid, something I got an award for caused his death? I didn't feel cool. I felt like there's something missing. So I'm racking my brain, and I'm realizing I don't know the answer. 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of graduate school. I've never had a class, never had any exposure to what makes molecules toxic. So I look into all the universities, and it turns out not one university on the planet requires a chemist to take a class in toxicology. Not one university on the planet requires a chemist to understand what makes a molecule have negative impact on the environment. Why is it we have red dyes that cause cancer? Why do we have plasticizers that cause birth defects? You think it might be because chemists don't learn any other way? So at the EPA with Paul Anastas, we realized the world needed something different. And we needed to have a way of bringing scientists together, to have textbooks, to have workshops, to have conferences, to have classes. And so we wrote this book called Green Chemistry 20 years ago. Had I thought anyone was ever going to read this book, we would have written a better book. But I feel like Forrest Gump. Here it is 20 years later. The book's been translated into a bunch of different languages. I've been to over 50 countries, meeting presidents and prime ministers and cutting ribbons and stuff. And anyone could have written this book. It's just absolute common sense. You turn the page, okay, when is there something that's special? Yeah, chemists should know this. Before they make a molecule, they should anticipate the negative harm. Yeah, it's just so common sense, but it's just something that strangely the field of chemistry never really thought of. And so that's kind of the pathway that got to green chemistry.
So that's wonderful. It's obviously a great story, right?
There's a lot of people in green chemistry in addition to me doing so much stuff.
So let me ask you, John, you talked about how you got the path to green chemistry, and it's a great story, and it has mind and heart in it. But there are a lot of people out here who maybe aren't chemists, and maybe if they're like me, chemistry wasn't, even if they're STEM background, maybe chemistry wasn't their favorite thing. But yet we use chemistry every day. Can you talk a little bit about how important chemistry, particularly green chemistry and the materials that come from it, are for impact inventing?
Well, again, the idea here is when you think about anyone in the business of making things that are sustainable, making things that are better for society or for the environment, designers and engineers must use the materials that are available to them to construct these products. Now, the problem is, no matter how you sew, bolt, glue, weld stuff together to make a product, if the building blocks aren't sustainable, the product can't be sustainable. If a solar panel is using toxic materials, it's important and the world needs alternative energy, but your job's not done. If a water purification device is using formaldehyde as a cross-linker to make the membranes, well, you're getting there. But what I have seen is the missing element of all of this is the fundamental building blocks. And so no matter where you are in the innovative process, at the end of the day, if you're making a thing, you're obtaining those things, and you have an opportunity to request a demand that you understand not just what the thing does, but how is it made and where is it coming from? And has anyone actually considered the components and the process and the moral and the ethical components that go into the construction of the materials that are your starting point? Because by taking and using that material and being successful, you have a very significant impact on the success of that material. If you're propagating a nasty material, you got to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, am I doing the right thing?
So, that makes all the sense in the world to me, sitting here, and probably to everybody in this audience. How easy is it to spread this in the world? Common sense, you go out there, you talk to people in industry. Aren't they clamoring for products that will provide this? So tell us a little bit about how you get things out there.
So my definition of green chemistry is a technology that has superior performance and superior cost. And oh, by the way, here's the sustainability narrative. The purpose of green chemistry is to say, if you are saying to someone, well, this product doesn't really work, and it's kind of expensive, but you should morally and ethically buy it, that's not sustainable. In a hypothetical world where an election changes the worldview of environmental policy, hypothetically, any kind of regulatory construct will fall like a house of cards. However, if the intrinsic technology supports the economic model by having superior performance and superior cost, you're kind of immune to those ups and downs of policy. Now, so if you accept that green chemistry has superior performance, superior cost, and oh, by the way, here's the sustainability narrative, there is no barrier to getting into the market except its invention. But if chemists don't know what makes molecules toxic, if chemists don't know what makes molecules have negative impact on the environment, how do you invent something that you don't know how to do? So industry immediately, within a couple of years of this book coming out, every major company had green chemistry programs. It just makes sense. If you think of the costs associated dealing with waste, dealing with hazards, the liability, all the different things that people have to pay for, it's a no-brainer. A multinational company, recently, its R&D budget was $1 billion a year. Its environmental compliance budget was $1 billion a year. So the CEO says, from now on, I want my scientists to only invent non-toxic, environmentally benign things that aren't regular. Well, not one of those scientists have had the training to do it. This isn't an issue of demand. It's an issue of supply. We don't have a workforce. So any organization, any university, any municipality, any developing country that embraces this, not only is this moral and ethical component, we're talking about workforce development. We're talking about jobs creation. We're talking about sustaining a viable economy that doesn't have negative impacts. But it's that trick of getting that skill set into this generation, into next generation.
So I want to turn to education in a minute, because you've set us up really well for that. But before we do that, I'd like you to give some examples of some products. And we were just talking about one before we came on stage, which was you were actually the inventor who created the technology that allowed the reclaimed plastic from the oceans to turn into Adidas shoes. Anybody know the Adidas shoes made from recycled plastic?
So we like to be behind the scenes, but if you look at, so I was standing on the center stage of the United Nations General Assembly with one of the guys from within the board of directors of Adidas 2 years ago when they held up the ocean plastics shoe. That we designed that at WBI. That's an example. Another crazy example that, do you want me to give a couple examples?
Yeah, give a couple. I think it's fun.
So one day I'm thinking of this concept called insect sclerotization, okay? It's the process by which a bug loses its exoskeleton, okay? So what happens is when the bug loses, it can't grow, so it loses its exoskeleton, and over the course of a couple hours, it turns from white to black. I'm going, there's something in nature that goes from white to black. So I learn about the biochemistry of it. It's called a tyrosinase oxidative cascade. I mimic the chemistry. I don't grind up bugs. I mimic the chemistry, buy a bunch of gray hair, stick it in, and it goes dark. So then I go, wait a minute, there's a dark strand, there's a lighter strand, and I call the vendor, go, oh, John, that wasn't one person's hair. That was a bunch of people. And so I jump in the chair and I go, hit me. I'm the grayest person in the room. And they color my hair. The picture that is for this thing, I got brown hair. Well, that was just 2 years ago. And that's because this is, and so just like your finger has a fingerprint, we discovered that your hair has a hairprint. And the product that's been on the market for 2 years, called Hairprint, restores your original color hair. It doesn't color it, it doesn't paint it. If you had brown hair and it's gray, it goes brown. If you have black hair and it's gone gray, it goes black. And like artificial coloring of hair, every strand looks the same. Here, each strand has its nuances, so you can't even tell that someone's done it. It's permanent, it won't wash out, it'll grow out. But for $39.99, if you act right now, they'll throw it in. It's been licensed to a company called Hairprint, and that's an example of a green chemistry technology.
Are you able to share any that are more kind of in the industry, vein?
Yeah, so asphalt is an example.
Asphalt.
So there's a
Talk about asphalt. Everybody here is dying to hear.
All right, asphalt is such a cool thing. It really is. There's 1 billion miles of asphalt paving in the United States. Every year, 10% gets repaved. And when they repave it, they dig up the old stuff, but because the sun and the air made it hard and brittle, it goes into a landfill. Maybe they take 5% and grind it up and reuse it, but we got landfills all over the place of this old asphalt. Now the petroleum material is in there, the aggregate is in there, and it's just out there. So I said, there's got to be a way to do that. And so my dream is to have the street Zamboni. It goes down the street, it digs up in the front, and it paves in the back. Now, we don't have the energy quite right yet, but we have this additive. And so a couple years ago, we dug up my driveway. Now, this is 2 days before Thanksgiving. My family's a little nervous. These trucks come, and they're laughing at me. They go, John, it's 17 degrees Fahrenheit. We can't pave in this cold. You're using 90% recycled material. You can't use this amount. We're going to open up the truck. A big hockey puck's going to come on your lawn. We're going to drive away. I had someone from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation there with a clipboard. I said, okay, go ahead. And it falls out like sand. They scream like school children and jump on their bulldozers. It worked. And so we now have this product. It's called, I wanted to call it Entropy Mix. And the people said, oh, that would never work. I go, how about Delta S? And they go, oh, that's good. So scientists in the audience know that I got away with something there. But there's a company called Collaborative Aggregates, and now they sell in over 37 states this additive that goes into asphalt that allows you to recover all the recycled material, but also it lowers the processing temperature. So I think companies, they're not doing it for the altruistic reasons. They're doing it because it lowers the processing temperature. When you fill a truck with asphalt, the clock starts ticking. It's cooling down, it's cooling down. But this allows you to have almost an hour more a day, and so that non-lost revenue from the lost inventory and everything, so again, it has better performance than what people are doing now, it has better cost than what's doing now, and oh, by the way, here's the sustainability narrative.
So we've been sitting here and you've talked about, you've been involved in inventing cancer drugs, you've talked about hair colorings, you've talked about shoe textiles, you've talked about asphalt, right? So they don't necessarily all fall in the same bin. Can you talk a little bit about what is the mindset that allows you to do that? And is that something unique to you, or is that something that can be fostered in the rest of us?
Oh, I think that we in science love to create our little boxes. I'm not a scientist, I'm a chemist. I'm not a chemist, I'm an organic chemist. I'm not an organic chemist, I'm a synthetic organic chemist. I'm not a synthetic organic chemist, I'm a nitrogen. So, yeah, and we love these little teeny boxes that are great for journal publications. But here's the biggest kept secret in the world. A molecule doesn't know what industry it's in. All right. And so what really is interesting is molecular behavior has not that much diversity of how molecules interact, and that's why I call it molecular psychology. Once you understand the inherent tendencies of molecules, and chemistry jargon, you understand the hydrogen bonding, the pi stacking, the lipophilic interactions, it's amazing the patterns that are similar. You know, so it's interesting. One day I'm digging in asphalt. I'm digging and holding the asphalt and looking at my cell phone goes off, and it's clinicians in Finland reporting on an Alzheimer's drug that we invented. Now, most people would step back and say, he's got boots and a hard hat and asphalt, and he's talking about neuroscience. But wait a minute, the mechanism for Alzheimer's is these molecules interrupt this aggregate of proteins in how they assemble and disassemble. What is asphalt? An aggregate of polymers controlling how they assemble, and it's the same thing. And so once you see that science, technology has so much overlap and similarity, what you learn here immediately transposes to here and here. And you don't have to learn a million things, you have to learn a few things. And then the idea is to see that commonality. And I think everyone's capable and does that.
So I would hazard that most people here would probably feel that their educational process didn't take them down that path. And so I'd ask you the question, all deference to educators in the audience, but can you speak a little bit about how we might think about changing education to allow more of that kind of thinking to happen, and specifically maybe even reference to chemistry about how you would change thinking about chemistry education?
Well, obviously it's presumptuous of me to be critical of the field of education. You know, I can say that the life that I've lived, I have certain observations that make sense to me, but please, I'm not presumptuous enough to say this is the way the world should be. But I feel it all kinds of comes down to that we overemphasize precedent, that everything about education is about what happened before. And because no one can ever master everything that came before, we're always left with a sense of incompleteness, that if I thought of something, if it's good, it probably did happen before, but I didn't know it. And so everything is about what's happened before. And if you think about it, that's so easy to measure. If you're giving a test and you say, okay, what has happened before in this field? Well, you're either right or wrong. But what we really need to be focusing on is, based on all these things, project something that is unprecedented. And that's just so hard not to do, not to talk about, but to evaluate. And I think because we're always in education, you need to get a report card at the end of the semester, you need to have grades, everything is focused on how we can grade it. But many famous people have said that which is measurable isn't necessarily worth measuring, and that which is not measurable isn't necessarily needed to be measured. And so we focus on that which we can measure as opposed to that which is important. And because precedential knowledge is so easy to measure, I think we focus on that. And so obviously, maybe we don't, if we could get rid of grades somehow so that people could have more higher quality way of training this thing. But that's, I think, the first key is that, because if you think about it, if I go to a group of people and I give them two ideas, and there's 10 people, and they're all sitting around the room, these men and women are evaluating my idea. If everyone in the room scratches, itching, goes, that sounds pretty good, yep, that sounds pretty good, and another one, they go, this guy's crazy, there's no way this is gonna happen. Which one is gonna be funded? Which one's more innovative? And so this desire for precedence pushes us to the lowest level of innovation. And so so somehow we've got to come to terms with dealing with intellectual risk.
So you've been involved, obviously, in creating a field of green chemistry, and you also are involved in helping to transform education in that space. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned earlier, but maybe to restate, what's the difference in how you think about green chemistry versus chemistry?
Okay.
And then what would need to change? And maybe speak a little bit about the work you're doing helping that enter the educational process.
Okay. So the best way that I explain this is I have a 5-year-old daughter, Natalie, and like every father of a child, she's just amazing, okay? She communicates so perfectly. She could sit in front of you and have a perfect conversation. You would ask her questions, she would answer questions. She has no idea what a noun is. She has no idea what a verb is, and yet she communicates just fine, thank you. In a few years, she's gonna sit in a class and she's going to learn about sentence structure. She's going to learn about nouns and verbs. You might say to yourself, well, why bother? She's already by that time reading and writing. She's speaking perfectly. Why bother learn about nouns and verbs? Well, the thing is for better or for worse, she's just aping her parents and her friends. She hasn't really internalized the concept of communication. When she learns nouns and verbs and parts of speech, she goes from getting by to, with willful intent, constructing her thoughts in a way that not only helps her communicate to the outside world, but to communicate with herself. And that structure is critical. I would argue every chemist, every material scientist wakes up in the morning and says, I'd rather not die today. And so when they go into the lab and they make their decisions of what they're going to do, they kind of don't want to hurt themselves. Companies, the really smart ones, have realized if you kill your customers, that's bad for sales. So they inherently try not to do that. But in chemistry, there's no sentence structure. Like a 5-year-old trying to get by speaking, there is no rules to the game. There is no way of addressing this at a higher intellectual level. Yeah, you can put, hey, yeah, that person there made something a little safe. Oh, that person, but it's not by pedagogic process. And so the 12 principles of green chemistry are kind of like the grammar rules of chemistry if you want to anticipate negative harm on human health and the environment. And so getting that into the chemistry curriculum, in my opinion, is critical, and that we need to have anyone who goes to a chemistry program needs to learn something about this. Now, the good news is I would argue every single chemistry program that I'm aware of has 1 or 2 faculty that are passionate about green chemistry. It's really kind of exploded. This is an international movement where every university has it now, and it's really heartwarming to see this going on. But the problem is, what if a student doesn't encounter those faculty? Or what if one of those faculty decide to move to another university? It's not systemic. And so Beyond Benign is a nonprofit. We're working with K through 12 education to, I'll talk about that in a minute, and universities to say to chemistry departments, get this into the required curriculum somehow, whether it's a standalone class, whether it's integrated into some other class, whether it's a seminar. So it's completely agnostic to how they do it, but let's find a way to get it into the, and so my dream is that one day in the future where no student receives a degree in chemistry that doesn't have the tools to assess and identify what makes things hazardous. That's the dream. I don't want every university to sign the commitment. I want to get to a day where the commitment's no longer necessary.
So I certainly think it's a fabulous vision, and I agree with it. And I would challenge those of you in the audience to also think a little bit about how does it extend past chemistry, and how do we really think about that kind of environmental responsibility penetrating everything we do, whether it's engineering, biology, chemistry, obviously physics, beyond. Because without that kind of thinking, we're never going to get to the impact inventing we're talking about here today. John, I know we have a few minutes left, but we're supposed to be wrapping up. You said you never run over, so I'm going to keep you to that, which is great. And since I'm the one controlling that, I should keep with it. But I wondered if you had a few words for the conversation for the audience. So the audience is a mixture here. How many of you are students out in the audience? Oh, okay, we got great student representation today. How about entrepreneurs? There's probably some overlap there, right? A lot of entrepreneurs. Okay, great. How about investors? People who are investing in companies. We got some investors in the room? I see some around. Yep. The entrepreneurs are looking around crazily, writing down notes. Guy in the back left seat. No. So with that said, there are a lot of different audiences here, and they all, I assume, have some way that they can contribute to better impact inventing, whether it's through green chemistry or otherwise. What would be your advice to the folks in the room?
I think that the first thing is I love the word impact. You know, impact has a lot of connotations to it now. You know, when a baseball player takes a bat and makes impact on the ball, that moment of impact defines everything. What the trajectory is 3 seconds later has to do with that moment of impact. Any kind of two objects colliding upon impact, that trajectory that is cast out, the most important, overwhelmingly significant moment is that nanosecond of impact. And if you're doing impact investment, you know, you're doing impact inventing, or you want to be an inventor that's doing impact things, take that word to heart, that the decisions that you're making at that very beginning as you're dreaming of what you're doing, the materials that you're going to use, the people you're going to work with, the processes that you're going to find acceptable, you have profound impact based on those decisions. Now, once you get forward, once investors are investing, once you're planning pilot scale facilities, you no longer have the ability to make those changes. And the world just kind of takes over, and you cry in your milk that you wish you did, but it's too late. And so the time to be thinking about these things isn't after you've got your investment and you're running down the road. It's got to be before, and just be thinking critically that it is the willful intent, it is the design of the process in which you have the most important time to deal with these issues. And so whether you are a consumer buying things, whether you are a merchant selling things, it's always important to sit back and reflect upon what those decisions are that you're making, and being very conscious of the impact that you're having. And to be here with a group of people that define themselves as innovators, inventors, and the creators of the next generation of technology, pretty optimistic that we got this covered. We just got to figure out how to get the skill sets out there.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to, first of all, thank John for what I think was a fabulous discussion, and I am sure the audience feels the same way. I'm very thankful for the audience being here today and the voices we touched. So I would ask you all to join me in thanking John for being here today. And please